All right, so for today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the Doyle 9.5-inch Linesman Pliers. Now, the model number for these is 64571. Now, since I've started my channel, I've kind of always stayed away from Harbor Freight, but decided to recently go ahead and check out some of the tools that they had to offer, considering I've seen some good reviews and some people that seem to like the Harbor Freight tools for what they have to offer. So I figured I might as well go ahead and pick up some tools from them just to kind of see how they are and how they stack up to some of the other tools that I have. So this particular pair of linesman pliers, I believe they compare to a pair of Klein linesman pliers. I believe it is the D2000 series or the J2000 series that have the hardened cutting knives on them. I believe on their website this pair of Doyles is what they would compare to Klein. I believe these guys came in at, I think it was $15, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And I picked them up at my local store. Now, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I'm aware, I believe the Doyle brand for all of their pliers, for what I've seen at my local store, they all have the dipped handle on them. I don't believe they have a comfort grip version in them. I know some of the Quinn pliers have that, but I don't recall or remember seeing any of the Doyle pliers with the comfort grip handles. So you do have these red dipped handles here on the plier, and it's just kind of like your standard dipped handles. When I first started off in the trade and buying tools, I was all about the dipped handles because they're a little bit more cheaper than the comfort grip handles. But now that I've been in the trade for at least, I think I'm coming up on 5 years now, I have come over to really like the comfort grip handles over the dipped handles, especially when you're using a tool for a prolonged period of time. Now, these also feature a crimper, so you can use these to crimp some of your wire terminals if you don't have a pair of crimpers, or if you don't want to go and get your crimpers, these guys are going to have that crimper built into them. And then you also have some small little teeth down there on the bottom, which I know some people like to use for pulling, whether it's a fish tape or you're trying to pull a wire or whatever. You can use those teeth to do so if you please. Now, coming up to the main part of the tool, you have the Doyle name that is laser etched onto the surface, and you have your cutting jaws or your cutting knives here on the plier. Now, these are laser hardened, just kind of like the Klein D2000 series or the J2000 series. So with them being laser hardened, they're going to be able to not only cut through your, just your standard copper aluminum wire, but you're also going to be able to cut through ACSR, screws, nails, and then, some of your other common harder wires that you're going to run into in the trade, or in the trades, I should say. So they do have that. And then you have this little bevel on here on the top. I believe that is for prying out staples, screws, and things like that. If you wanted to use your pair of lineman pliers, kind of gives you a little bit of leverage to pull them out. Now, coming to the nose of the pliers, you do have a fairly aggressive cross hatching there on both the top and the bottom jaws, which comes in handy, especially if you're going to use these to strip and or if you're trying to pull something. That aggressive cross hatching is definitely a big must on a pair of lineman pliers. Just so you can get a lot of grip on whatever you're trying to pull. So that is nice to see that they did pretty much the entire jaw. There's only just a little bit of triangle on the bottom that they didn't do, but that is going to be fairly sufficient. And then you could also, if you wanted to, you could probably use the outside of these pliers if you didn't have a reamer for reaming conduits, or maybe a box or whatever you're working on. You probably use the outside of this plier to ream that as well. And then coming to the back side, it's fairly simple. You do have a couple warnings here on the back side. They know you're going to always have the, always wear eye protection. And then they're going to remind you that these are not insulated. I know some people like to think that these dip grips and these comfort grips are have some sort of insulation when it comes to working on voltage. They do not, and obviously will not protect against electrical shock. So that is pretty much it for the detail on these guys. Now, this pair of pliers, I think, was sitting in the packaging for quite a bit of time, because you can see that there is some oil residue that has dried or has kind of like worked its way into the kind of the polished face of the plier. I definitely didn't do that. I noticed that when I opened it out of the packaging, but obviously it's a tool, so that is not really a big deal. So now we'll go ahead and zoom the camera out, and we'll get into some of the functionality of these. So obviously the main feature everyone's probably going to want to see is if they can cut through some screws. So I have a 632 machine screw and an 832 machine screw. We're going to go ahead and cut through that 632. Now, I will say before we go ahead and cut through that, these pliers are definitely not really like, I guess you could say broke in, whereas some of your nicer pliers like your Knipex and, you know, you occasionally get a pair of Kleins that when you get them, they just are super loose and they're super easy to move. These guys definitely are like some of the Klein pliers that I've reviewed here on the channel. Definitely stiff, but hopefully with some time using them, you will be able to, you know, break that free, and they'll be pretty loose where they're not so tight in your hand. So back to the 632 screw, we'll go ahead and see, go ahead and cut through that. So the 632 screw doesn't have any issues cutting through that guy. So go ahead and get that fully chopped up and out of the way. So the 632 screw, definitely fairly easy. Probably one of the easiest screws you're going to cut through. Now, the 832 screw is probably going to have a little bit more resistance. That's generally what I've noticed. You're going to have to use a little bit more force when cutting through them. But these lineman pliers have no issue cutting through this 832 screw, as you just saw. So we'll go ahead and get that out of the way. And while we're cutting through some stuff, we'll bring in some MC wire. I believe this is a 2-wire with a ground in there. So we'll go ahead and chop that up and go ahead and cut through and go ahead and cut through it again. I just got to make sure I got it all the way in the cutting knives so it'll cut through MC without an issue. And so we'll put that off to the side, and we'll bring in some different wires here to see if how sharp these cutting knives truly are, see if I can and or can't strip some of this wire here. So this is some green 10 gauge stranded wire that we use pretty much for doing grounds when we're doing rooftops. I have noticed, I picked this up from City Electric. I have noticed that the jacket on this wire is a little bit tough to pull off sometimes. So I may or may not struggle with it. That's just depending on how well I can do it. But as you see, we are able to strip that wire without any issues. And then, of course, I'm going to fight that jacket on this wire. But that's kind of where those aggressive teeth there on the nose of the plier are going to come in handy. Once you get some of that insulation off, you can just really grab onto it and pull it off of the wire. So we'll go ahead and chop that guy off. And that was actually a fairly pretty smooth cut right there. And we'll go ahead and strip these back again. And we'll go ahead and pull that off. And we are able to pull that insulation off. And I guess while we're at it, might as well throw a terminal onto that wire and stick it into the crimper and give this terminal a nice crimp, see how well we can do it. And I think I kind of just butchered this one, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it came out okay. But you can use it to crimp some of the wire terminals. So if you don't have a pair of crimpers around, these guys will have you covered. And we'll go ahead and chop that guy off and throw that away. So that was the 10 gauge stranded wire. Now we'll go with a little bit smaller of a wire. This is some 12 gauge stranded wire. If we were able to do it with the 10 gauge, I don't know why I wouldn't be able to do it with 12 gauge. And you're able to do it with that 12 gauge without any issues. And it cuts through that 12 gauge fairly well. And there you go again. We are able to strip that 12 gauge without any issues. So now I'll bring in a little bit thicker of a wire. I believe this is some H-stranded wire that I pulled off of, just kind of some scraps off of a rooftop changeout that we were doing. So we'll go ahead and see if I can't strip that away. And boom, we are able to pull off that insulation. And of course, these being a 9-inch pair of high leverage cutters, you're able to cut through that 8 gauge stranded wire without any issues. So overall, I kind of have to say that I am somewhat impressed with these pliers from Harbor Freight. I honestly went in there just kind of thinking that people were just, all about the kind of just the icon pliers. You don't really see a lot of reviews out there on the Doyle pliers, and I've always been pretty impressed with some of the icon tools that are out there. So like I said, that's one of the main reasons I decided to go to Harbor Freight and check out what their tools have to offer. And I will say I am pretty impressed with what they have to offer. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how well these will hold up in the long run compared to a pair of Kleins. Are the cutting jaws going to stay as sharp like a pair of Kleins will? Generally, with a pair of Linesman pliers, you can pretty much beat up on them, cut through pretty much anything, and the cutting knives are always going to stay sharp. So it'll be interesting to see if the cutting knives on these are going to stay nice and sharp, and it'll be interesting to see how well these hold up over time. But my first impressions on them, I have to say I'm fairly impressed, and I think we're going to see some more Harbor Freight tools here on the channel. And like I said, these are fairly inexpensive compared to just a standard pair of Linesman pliers. So maybe if you're just, first getting into the trades and you don't have a lot of money to spend on tools, I could easily recommend these for a first pair of pliers to where you could use them for the first couple of years of your apprenticeship until you can build up and or find tools that you like better. Maybe you want to go with comfort grip, or maybe you just want a nicer pair of Linesman pliers. These are definitely a nice starting set of pliers. So with that being said, that's kind of all I have for this video. So as always, there will be some links down in the description below if you would like to look up some more information about these. I will leave a link to them on the Harbor Freight website if you want to find out more about them and or check to see if a store near you has them in stock. I'm pretty sure almost all the Harbor Freights around are going to have them in stock. I believe you can order these online if you don't have a Harbor Freight close to you and you are looking to check them out. So go ahead and check that link out down in the description below if you would like to find more and or purchase these for yourself. But with that being said, that's kind of all I have for this video. So as always, thanks for watching.